Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Lytham Partners Spring 2025 conference. Today, we welcome Modular Medical to our spring conference. The company trades under the NASDAQ ticker symbol MODD. For today's Q&A discussion, I'm joined by Jeb Besser, CEO at the company. Jeb, welcome to the Lytham Spring conference.
Sure.
Let's get some updates on what's going on at Mod.
Okay, great. Let's see what's new. We're preparing for, it's pretty much in line with what we've guided to previously. We're preparing for a limited commercial launch in Q3 of this year for our novel next generation insulin pump that was cleared by the FDA last September. We'll also be submitting in the third quarter a modified version of our design that eliminates the external tube and puts the injection site underneath the device, albeit maintaining the removability that we think so many patients desire. And we plan to explore looking at, we filed for the CE mark as well, and we would anticipate that will get cleared sometime next year, and we're exploring other foreign markets as well.
Very good. You just referenced it, that there were certain upgrades or modifications that the team is seeking to get clearance on. Could you talk specifically about what those modifications are and kind of what the game plan would be in order to get them through the FDA?
It's probably the most important one, Roger, is that we're removing the tube that comes out of the side and placing it underneath the device, a la, kind of in the same direction that insulin is going, a true patch pump. We put the tube on initially as a way to alleviate FDA risk because the Ypsomed set that we're currently using, the Orbit One, was on a Deltec pump in the United States market in 2010, 2011. And so we didn't want the FDA to say, we love your novel two-part pump, but we hate your set. Go back to the drawing board. So we used an existing set. And so while we think this is fine, patients, doctors, and just the ability to actually find enough of these to make it worthwhile to sell are all telling us, launch this in a limited way to start to get user feedback and human use experience with it, but get the tubeless version of the product cleared, which we are going to submit as a special 510(k) in September. Meaning we're asking the FDA, is the tubeless design equivalent to the design that you cleared last year? And because it's a special 510(k), we'd anticipate clearance sometime around year end. Literally the only thing in the two-piece pump, the reusable that lasts for 90 days, nothing changes in this. It is identical to what we've already gotten cleared. And in the just 3-day disposable, the only thing that's different is instead of the tube that gets adhered in to the side, there's a port that's on the bottom. So we're literally changing one piece of molded plastic in both of the key components of the device, and then adding a set that sits underneath built into the pad that we already use. We're introducing no new materials at all. We're introducing one minor design change. We think that, and which actually lessens the amount of fluid pathway for the insulin to travel through. So we think that while you never want to say there can't be an issue with any of the testing, this is the same testing we did last year, and it seems quite low risk for a major improvement both in usability and profitability.
Right. And in terms of the actual FDA process itself, is this just like the initial approval process, or is there something different this time around?
Well, it's similar in that the key tests that are required are tests that we did last year. So we're very familiar with them in terms of but the total volume of the submission itself is about 10% of the volume last year. And a special 510(k), instead of a 45-day reviewer clock, it's 30 days and it's a single reviewer. But the requirement of a special 510(k) is that you're asking the agency a yes/no question. And the question in this case is this substantially equivalent to the device you cleared last year?
Got it.
And we think it's substantially equivalent and also a major improvement in terms of usability and cost of goods and what users want and what doctors want.
So at the end of the day, without the little pigtail coming out, this will be the functional equivalent of the Insulet pod in
Well,
terms of.
it's like an Omnipod, except that it is, it has a button on it so that you can use it without an external controller. It has 3 mLs instead of 2. So if you're someone who's a little bit on the bigger side and require relatively insulin resistant and requires a lot more insulin, this might be a better solution for you. And it's completely removable. In that if you want to take a break in that 3 days of wear, you can take it off for 30 minutes at a time and just put it on pause and set it to the side. If you want to do something where you wouldn't want to be wearing a pump, or just take a break. And you don't have to junk the entire thing when you take it off. That's another advantage of removability. But our injector system for the patch is completely different than Insulet's. So it's not an auto injector like what the Omnipod uses. So I think, this is not a like for like. And as we know, an exact copy of an Omnipod is a dangerous thing to do.
That we do, and other people know that as well.
Yes. Yes.
How do these regulatory requests tie into your timeline for commercialization of the product?
So what we're doing is that we're just finishing the qualification of our manufacturing line in Mexico, and that line is capable of handling 6,000 continuous users, but we simply are too short of pigtails to have more than a couple hundred on the initial design. And so, almost as bad as not launching a commercial product is launching a commercial product and then not being able to supply people and taking them back off it. So we're going to be very judicious about how many people we put on it before we know we have clear line of sight to converting them over to tubeless, because tubeless is where we're going, and we need to be able to both track them down and retrain them and make sure that we don't run out before we get the tubeless version cleared, because we plan to take the line down completely in September and redo it for tubeless launch at risk, so that we're ready to go as soon as the FDA says you're good, you're okay. And I think that's the right thing to do. It's well worth it, and it means that we'll be able to launch with 6,000 user capacity with tubeless in Q1, assuming the FDA gives us the thumbs up.
And is that, in terms of that timing on Q1 of now 2026, does that also tie into your approval process that's going on in Europe in terms of the EU?
We think that EU clearance will come sometime in the first half. So, we don't have unlimited capacity either. So I think, we're gonna look at how many units we want going to the EU or somewhere else in the world, and how many units we want going to the US. And we'll do that based on net returns, total cost of selling a commercial unit versus selling bare pumps to a distributor. Obviously, as you know, we plan to use distributors both here in the States and in Europe and elsewhere. So we're going to be largely indirect sales with some sales support regardless. So I don't think, we'll do whatever we have to do to maximize net returns, given our cost of capital.
Understood.
Roger, I think it's also worth saying that, it's the answer to another question that you and any viewer would be likely ask, which is, you're in Mexico, what is the impact of tariffs?
It was on my list. So.
Yeah, and so we might as well address it right now, which is the impact of tariffs is we're going to wait and see. We have 6,000 users of capacity right now. we could easily place another line for $1.5 million somewhere else inside of the U.S. tariff wall if we think that's advantageous, depending on what the tariff situation is when we get there. But if we're selling units overseas, they are just as eager to make sure that our manufacturing is outside of the tariff wall. So that's a fine balance that we have to strike as we're figuring out exactly where initial demand is going to come from. And what the net effect is of manufacturing this product in Mexico, even with the tariffs, relative to manufacturing in the States initially at low volumes.
So,
So
as we think about it, in terms of partnering with Philips Medisize, having somebody with both domestic as well as international capabilities to manufacture has proven to be, a good choice in a number of respects.
Philips Medisize is a U.S. company. They have facilities in Minneapolis, Arkansas, and elsewhere in the United States, as well as Querétaro, Mexico. So we can go wherever we tell them we want them to build clean room capacity for us to put the equipment in it, because we own the equipment. Like if we decided we wanted to ship everything back to the United States, we could do it. But I think it's much more likely that we'll just build something duplicative inside the U.S. if by then there isn't a carve out for medical devices or the like. So maximum flexibility as long as we can, as we see where initial demand is and where our best return on capital is in terms of supplying initial users.
Yeah, but clearly it gives you that optionality.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we got that, up front and out of the way. One of the things you've talked about historically is how easy the Mod 1 is to both learn and use. From as we're, starting the conversation about commercialization, how does that ease of use tie into the way you intend to market the product? And would you expect the pump to be marketed similarly in the United States or internationally? Kind of how do you think about that overall?
So I think, when you think about how easy it is to learn, essentially the Mod 1 or its successor product, the Pivot, which is just the tubeless version of it, that it essentially has about 6 basic configurations, whereas one of the more complex incumbents has between 1,200 and 1,300 configurations. And misconfiguring your pump means that you can put your life in danger. So from a burden on the user in terms of understanding exactly how it works, it is much, much simpler. And it was designed with the idea that our user could learn to use it in less than 30 minutes. So one, that's an advantage in terms of how you market it, because we can have distributors who can get their sales force up to speed relatively quickly and have a nice high margin product that they can carry in their bag. Especially in a primary care physician environment where some primary care physicians have a lot of patients with diabetes, some have very few. And we want to make sure that we think that's a big untapped market that we want to be a part of. And one. Two, right now, all current pump companies do almost all the training themselves when they sell direct. And we think that the ease of training here might incent the clinicians for a $50, $51 under Medicare reimbursement fee to train someone on a pump, that, hey, 20 to 30 minutes of training burden, that might be worth $51 to me, rather than the I'm going to put that on the manufacturer because there's no way I'm spending 2 days for a $50 reimbursement, right? And which makes logical sense. But also because of our more limited configurations, it allows us to provide them with training tools that will help them train the user and give the user a consistent experience so that we can onboard them faster without as much work as the other products have. And look, everybody promises this is going to be easier than what you might have experienced in the past, but the devil's in the details, and we think that our plans to build an ecosystem around this that will make this easier to learn is another important differentiator for us. That's made easier by the way our product was designed from the ground up. And Also, at some point we will add, we've got the Nudge BG thing going on. That's exclusive for him, not for us. So we can consider whether or not it's appropriate to add another AID, but we're not going to add features just to add features, because when you do that, you add complexity. Everything we do is with an eye towards, can we make the overall experience easier for the user, and allow them to stay on our easy to train on platform and grow with the platform without having to switch off of it.
Right. And I should just say, for our viewers who aren't necessarily up to speed on AID or Nudge, could you just give a quick 2-minute overview on kind of what you're trying to do and who your partner is?
Yeah, so AID is automated insulin delivery, and that's where sometimes automated insulin delivery can mean more work, but better results. And we initially will launch without AID because, look, better accuracy and better results have been available for 25 years with pumps, and that hasn't convinced 80% of the users to adopt that. So we need to both make care better and easier at the same time. And so, we're certainly interested in things that help that. So, the Nudge BG venture is with Lane Desbro, who's a co-author on a bunch of the Medtronic AID algorithms. Then he was at a company called Bigfoot, where the AID IP at Bigfoot was purchased by Insulet. And the concept at Nudge is, can we make the user experience easier by eliminating all carb counting around meals? And, if he can succeed in that, that's outstanding in terms of reducing the complexity, especially for someone who's brand new to pumping and brand new to, frankly, to diabetes. But there are other versions of AID that might also make things easier. So, we're gonna watch the space closely and see where it's appropriate. Right now, what we've done is we've made our hardware have all the necessary processing power and all the necessary communications technology to pair with any phone or CGM with any AID that's currently on the market without having to go back and get the hardware recertified.
Got it. So the chips and whether they be processing chips or communication chips are already in the cleared device.
Correct. Yep. Yep. And fully capable of handling any other AID that we want to bolt in there
Got it.
without having to
Right.
redesign the product. So, hope that answers the question.
I did indeed. In terms of, you've talked about it a little bit, the next steps for the company, both operationally, and you talked about, I think, a lot of what's going on from a regulatory standpoint. How about just from an operational standpoint as well as a strategic standpoint? What should the Mr. Market be looking for, say, for the next 6 months or so?
Well, Mr. Market should certainly be looking for us to validate the manufacturing, have first commercial users. Before we have first commercial users, we're going to do a single trial with 9 clinicians wearing the product for a short period of time. These are not what I would consider to be likely long-term users of our product, but let's just make sure that we have human use with people who are already wearing a CGM and who can certainly, validate that this pump works as well as the other pumps in terms of just raw mechanical accuracy. We're going to do 20 patients at a single practice with basically the same format, also to gain some experience right before we turn on commercial users. We already talked about commercial use. We talked about FDA submission of the Pivot, the tubeless version. And then you should also look for, either more filing progress on the international front or other distribution and, partnerships like that.
Got it. When you mentioned distribution, how should we think about, a U.S. distributor? Is this something that you're going to look to go it alone, or, how from when you have the ability to ramp up Mexico in the early 2026 timeframe, how will you be going to market, and what should we be looking for?
Well, I think we want a distribution partner who can take us both into the high volume endocrinology offices and diabetes educator offices where most pumps are prescribed today, not because we think we can displace or want to displace Medtronic, Tandem, or Insulet. We want to be there as an alternative for someone who says, no, I don't want any of those three options. Right. But I do want a patch form factor and I want something that I can learn easily. And as I've said many times, this is the, Felicia with the flip phone market. This is the market of maybe the less motivated or less tech savvy patient, or the patient who might be who might be tech savvy and motivated, but just simply wants a simpler experience because they've been on pumps for a long time. Um, and then and then we also want to target the primary care physicians who see at least 30, and I've heard much higher numbers, but we're going to go with at least 30% of the people who are on multiple daily injections. And that is an enormous market, and there's almost no pump prescription in that space. And so we want to provide a product that's easy enough that a primary care physician would feel comfortable writing it. But in order to do that, you've got to have a much more wide-reaching sales force that can convince the doctors that this is in fact something that they can manage. And I think we're going to find that in a broad-based distributor that not only touches diabetes, but maybe it touches respiratory, oxygen, and the like. And frankly, that's broadly the profile of people we talk to overseas too. Is there in other businesses as well that would touch those spaces. So and overseas the model and distribution here, you still have to maintain second level customer support and complaint handling, etc. Overseas, it tends to be much more of a, I sell you a bare pump that's got some local language support, and that's the end of it. You do customer support, you do reimbursement, you do all of the things that you need to do to support the patients. And so that would be the reason that we would do initial sales overseas where maybe the reimbursement isn't quite as high, but the cost to acquire a customer ends up net being better.
Right. So the burden of actually running that sales and marketing program is shifted onto a distributor in Europe.
Correct. Yeah, because let's call a spade here. Our market cap relative to everyone else in the space is de minimis. So our cost of capital is much, much higher. So we have to make choices about capital efficiency, and maybe the most efficient way to get a better return faster on our manufacturing utilization, which is a key barrier to entry and a key differentiator for us, is to find patients maybe that aren't in the United States if we can acquire them faster and at more reasonable cost. We'll have to see.
Got it. And just, kind of tying back in terms of your regulatory approvals in Europe, the product that's being approved is what's now called the pivot product.
That's
so
right.
the
Yes,
tubeless.
yes. We did not ever submit. We are not ever submitting the current Mod 1 tube product to Europe. That didn't make any economic sense, and we don't have the rights to use the Ypsomed set in Europe anyway. So that was always going to be a tubeless product.
Got it. So
any other regulatory clearance we go for will either be tubeless or it will be tubed, and then we'll modify it for tubeless afterwards. And the reason we would do that is if they have a accelerated pathway for an already acquired U.S. clearance.
Yep. So are there a number of countries out there like that have that kind of
yes,
we'll call it accelerated procedures?
Yes, there are.
Okay.
Yes, there are of radically varying size in terms of the marketplace for a pump.
Well, look forward to hearing some more about those as you progress.
Yeah.
I know we're getting a little shorter on time, so let me keep moving. We've talked about the pathways toward commercialization, et cetera. You also could conceivably seek a strategic partner or take out of the company. How should investors think about the opportunities at Mod right now?
Look, I think it's the same answer as always, which is we're going to do whatever we think is best in terms of a return for the shareholders. And I think that given our relative cost of capital and the highly valuable and differentiated strategic asset that we own here that's been substantially de-risked from a regulatory standpoint. Do I think that there's an opportunity here to partner this with, either on a regional or worldwide basis with different strategic players? Yes. It takes two to tango, though. So, I think we're having those discussions and we'll see where they lead. I don't, you know, I think, I
Can't tell
still
the
think
future, but
no, no, I think
no,
I think our value proposition is as strong as it's ever been in terms of us as an independent entity or us as part of another entity or anything in between, frankly, because we're very confident in our execution on the regulatory and operational side.
very good. One last question, and I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but there's a potential for using the cleared pump as a GLP-1 delivery device. And kind of where do things sit on that, and what are the next steps on moving that process forward?
Well, we were excited with our preclinical study that read out in November in terms of showing a differentiated delivery profile where you can use a lot less product on a baseline level, add a bolus around a meal, and show a very synergistic and unexpected incremental effect, which would allow people who have tolerance issues for GLP-1s to both be able to back off much more quickly than they can with a weekly shot, and if they go too high and are uncomfortable, or get more efficacy with a lower baseline than they could tolerate otherwise. And so that's an attractive concept. But at the end of the day, we're also not a drug developer, right? And so we want to not box ourselves out into only having one potential partner in terms of the compound that we select. And if we advance this into human trials, which we plan to do later this year in the second half, to prove the concept out there, I think we'll see it. We'll see if there's an appropriate partner who's got the pharmaceutical manufacturing side of it.
Got it. Although the pairing of a unique device and a generic drug could essentially take that generic drug and turn it back into a much more exclusive product.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the drug that we're taught that's most likely to be the candidate that we advance is exenatide, which is the old Byetta, and Byetta has at least 8 cleared ANDAs and multiple other drug master files that have been cleared by the FDA. So we have a lot of choice there. And as a standalone platform, it's not doing very well because, as you would expect, because right now in its current form, it's cleared as a 3 to 4 times a day injectable with no significant weight loss claim, although it has great postprandial blood sugar knockdown. So, I think using it in a pump as a weight loss compound is a differentiated with a combined basal bolus is an exciting and differentiated use that could potentially come with its own IP and increase the value greatly for someone who just has the 7th or 8th cleared exenatide
Right.
on the market as an injectable.
Yeah. We look forward to hearing more news on that as it develops.
Good.
And I think with that, we're out of time.
Okay.
So, Jeb, firstly, I want to thank you for joining us here at the Lytham Partners Spring 2025 Investor Conference. And of course, thank you to everybody watching. If you have any questions or would like to schedule a meeting with Mod, please send me an email at weiss@lythampartners.com and enjoy the conference and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Roger.
Jeb, thank you.